Well, so it's been a while since I've done one of these. We ramble. In actuality, the reason for that was mainly down to, it was a long time coming admittedly, but towards the start of the year, I left my job. Partly down to stress, in all honesty, because I had barely any time off and my pay was abysmal. And I was planning on leaving at some point this year, but it just, certain factors got in the way and I sort of left prematurely, but I refused to sort of sign on and whatnot. You know, I've gone down that road before, way back in the day in the job with the job centre, and it's not fun. So I never bothered this time. And because I didn't have much money to begin with, it was somewhat idiotic, to say the least. Plus, obviously, as I've mentioned in a previous ramble video, funnily enough, at the very same location I am right now, I was in debt due to a major mishap with my car and a pothole. Since working again though and whatnot, so I am back out and about, which is good. It's fucking great to be able to take my dog out again. It's good to get out with my missus as well. So yeah, that's that. You coming? Or are you sniffing? No, of course he's sniffing. Loch Moy, it's one of my favourite places to go to for anybody that's ever up in the Highlands, and if their interests are remotely hike related and whatnot, then I can't recommend this loch enough. It's really peaceful and it's quite large as well, so you can walk the entirety of the way around it. But I will add as a slight caveat to that, you have to kind of make your own way at a certain point, because there's not a sort of path that you can follow the entire way around. So you have to improvise. Yeah, I thought I would talk briefly. I always say that, and my videos end up like 20 minutes long. Talk briefly about Scottish democracy, you know? So, obviously the big news in Scotland at the moment is Humza Yousaf's resignation. Prior to his resignation, of course, we had the Greens being ousted from government, making the SNP a minority government. And I mean, there's been multiple takes on why this came to pass, why the SNP decided to get rid of the Greens, and let me just add as a slight caveat before I proceed with my opinion on this. I am very much aware, or of the belief anyway, I should maybe stress, that politics by and large is nothing more than a dog and pony show, theatre. You know, there's not really much difference between that and EastEnders and whatnot, except in a Scottish parliamentary context. It's a bit more white than EastEnders. Nonetheless, the point is though that I find it to just be somewhat theatrical, and my opinion has never been any different on that regard for many a year. So yeah, just before someone's like, "Yo, you're just gonna get another dickhead in." I know that. Like, well, you don't need to tell me that. Fucking these hot takes, they're quite irritating at times. That said, oh, Jesus. So why do I think that the SNP ousted the Greens? Well, to put it simply, I believe it to be nothing short of damage control, if nothing else. You know, the SNP, their popularity over the course of the last year, especially, has been diminishing. And I mean, don't get it twisted, it was never really that they had the greatest deal of popularity anyway. It's a bit of a misconception to suggest that the vast majority of people in Scotland are singing from the SNP's hymn sheet, you know? You know, more people, if I'm not mistaken, voted for all the other parties, but obviously that splits the difference. So it makes it look as if the SNP have got this, you know, mammoth majority. That's not to take anything away from the fact that they do obviously have, or they did have quite a substantial following, but it's somewhat misleading to suggest that their following was as big as it is perceived to be. But over the course of the last year especially, we've seen the BS with Nicola Sturgeon and her husband, you know, and obviously he was arrested again, and he was charged, and she seems to have, pardon the pun here, walked away scot-free. Fuck off. I'm sorry, but just fuck off. I don't buy it. But you'll never ever 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 hear the truth in that regard, because at the end of the day, like, due to the fact they're married, she doesn't have to testify and vice versa. But that's what happened anyway. But even prior to his arrest for the second time, their support was beginning to dwindle anyway, due to Hamza Yusuf being in charge and all of the fucking nonsense that they were starting to punt out. All of their, they'll have to blame the Greens for this, which annoys me. All these green policies, if you want to call it that. I'm not going that way, it's too boggy, but I'm going to go this way. But yeah, so anyway, yeah, the popularity was beginning to dwindle, obviously. That's not really up for debate. And we're starting to hemorrhage members and whatnot. Then obviously, with that, there was the talks that Scottish Tories had said that they were going to put forward a motion of no confidence towards Hamza Yusuf. Quite frankly, why they didn't put forward a vote of no confidence in the entirety of the government is anyone's guess. But the Greens had said that they were going to be supporting this vote of no confidence, obviously. And then the Scottish Labour Party came out and said that they were going to be putting or filing a vote of no confidence into the entirety of the government. So that subsequently resulted in Hamza Yusuf, despite saying initially that he was going to stand his ground, and he was like banging on about, you know, some of the media were pumping out stories that he was apparently trying to have talks with them all and whatnot, you know, like the Tories and whatnot, to come together, you know, effectively trying to save his job. And then he resigned. So the vote of no confidence towards him was pulled, leaving the vote of no confidence directed towards the entirety of the government. And then, of course, the Scottish Greens backed the SNP in this instance. Thus, the SNP still remain in government. They still remain in government. I'm just trying to, establish a way around here because it's very boggy. Yeah, they still remain in government, and currently there's now talks as to who's going to take over now that Hamza's gone, with the front runner now being John Swinney, the dickhead, another continuity candidate, you know. But throughout all of this, prior to this vote of no confidence and whatnot, when the Butte House Agreement, which is obviously, for anybody who's not aware, the agreement that the SNP and the Greens signed back in, I believe, 2021. Sorry. The Greens were screeching from time to time about this being anti-democratic, you know. It's fucking remarkable. And then we throw, let's go back into the Wayback Machine, and we look at every Tory leader that's come and gone, from Boris to Liz Truss to Rishi Sunak. And in each instance, when one of these individuals was put into that position of Prime Minister and was subsequently forced to resign or whatever, and a new individual come in to replace them, voted in exclusively by Tory members, SNP were the quickest in every instance to screech, squeal, scream, seethe about democracy and how it shouldn't be up to the Tories to decide, or Tory members to decide,
who runs the country. Each and every time they call for a general election. But yet when it comes to Scotland, the same can't be said. Yeah? What are we on now? Leader number 3? We had Sturgeon. This way, come on, let's go. Come on. We had Sturgeon. And then we had Yusuf. And now we're going to have, presumably, John Swinney. Where's the general election? Where's the Scottish election? Where's the calls for this? And this actually goes, this is directed at all of the opposition parties as well. Why are they not calling for it? You know? And I'll hold my hands up and admit that I haven't watched too much of parliamentary proceedings this week. I've been busy. But it's not exactly mainstream media headline-esque, is it? I don't hear people demanding an election in Scotland. I don't. It's funny how that works. And there's obviously a deafening silence from the SNP. It's funny how democracy only seems to work in the instance when it favours the SNP. You know, they're happy to call for, or demand even, for an election to be held. Come on, this way! This way! Come on! Call for an election to be held when they think that it could potentially get the Tories out of positions of power. But when it comes to their own ilk, nah, not so much. It's funny how that works. And this goes back to at least 2014, if nothing else. Where I began to sort of, well, I tell a lie, it was 2016 for me when I started to observe just how low the Scottish Government would stoop in terms of their fakery concerning democracy. This fucking stupid word that they throw about all the time, even coining the term democracy denial. It's just remarkable. Let's talk about democracy for a second, you know, air quote unquote democracy in an SNP context, shall we? 2016. This way, pal. Finally get back out of the lock. 2016. The EU referendum, where the SNP, more specifically Nicola Thinlips, told her members, her supporters, and the people of Scotland, as they keep fucking saying nowadays, that the only way to see a second independence referendum was to vote to remain in the European Union. In the event of Scotland voting to leave the European Union, then the premise for a second independence referendum doesn't arise. I'm more or less paraphrasing Nicola Sturgeon's own quotations in that regard. Okay? The day the referendum result was counted and whatnot, the EU referendum, all we ever heard from that point on was Scotland's voice has been ignored, we're being dragged out against our will, etc. Despite the fact, totally ignoring the fact that she, at the very bare minimum, influenced the vote to a certain extent with her encouragement for people to vote a particular way if they had a referendum in mind. As the months leading up to the years followed, the SNP began to deceive and blur the lines regarding independence and insinuate that independence and European Union membership were one and the same, they were synonymous. And then over time, it just became the norm, where now you have legitimate ball-bags, and that is what they are, misled, politically inept ball-bags who vote SNP, who malfunction when you ask them how they voted in 2014. They've even got some cock and bull story regarding 2014's referendum, where they try to suggest that the only reason that Scotland voted to leave the UK in 2014 is because, remain in the UK. The only reason that Scotland voted to remain in the UK in 2014 is because we were promised that it was the only way to stay in the European Union. That is in spite of the fact, and I've got some clips to prove it, but I'm pretty sure anybody with who's been honest with themselves remembers it themselves anyway. But I have some clips anyway. That is in spite of the fact that Nicola Sturgeon, as far back as 2013, was talking about the fact that there was a growing European Union scepticism, or EU scepticism, starting to manifest within the entirety of the UK. And she went so far as to say that voting to stay in the UK is a bigger threat to Scotland's EU membership than voting to leave the UK. This was in 2013. Point is though, they belly bullshit and they lie. right? And then, of course, my democracy. What have they've done since as well? Not only did they just completely disregard the 2014 referendum, and I've already sort of alluded to that one as to their justification, if you try to say that to them, where they make up nonsense. Come on, pal. Come on, you. Oh, it's good to see him just exploding, you know? But they ignored over 1 million plus people in Scotland that voted to leave the EU. Right? And then, of course, every election that has followed, right? They try to pretend that they're not like a one policy party. So they'll sit there and they'll say, and I remember they did it with the EU elections. They made all these fucking promises that it's not just about independence and whatnot. That's not what this is about. Blah 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 blah. Right? And I've got these videos. I just can't remember them to hand, but I remember talking about it at the time. But the second the EU election was counted, votes were counted, they in turn said, the votes that we got show that we're, that people in Scotland want to rejoin the EU. You fucking told people that it wasn't just about that. Anyway, they disregard pretty much every single fucking referendum result that's occurred. Well, they have, literally, every referendum result that's occurred. They whine and piss and moan and seethe and dilate when the Tories replace their leaders. And let's be honest, they fucking do it. But the SNP are literally no better at this point. Demanding elections, demanding and insinuating that it's a denial of democracy. But when it's the SNP, come on, pal. Not so much. Interesting how that works. Interesting. Come on, pal. And then, of course, there's the Greens as well. They were seething, pissing and moaning about democracy when they were booted out of government just a week prior to Hamza's resignation. Not even that, right? But they had the opportunity to boot the SNP out of government. Why didn't they do it? Shouldn't it be about the people having a say? Because it would have forced an election in Scotland had they been booted out. But there was no election to be had because the Greens, for all their fucking tripe about being in favour of democracy, supported the SNP. It's such a fucking charade, pardon my French. Scottish politics is no different to anywhere else, I know that much, but I don't live anywhere else. I live in Scotland. And to observe it, it's just obscene. It's a total insult to the intellect of anybody that observes it, in all honesty. It really is. Where is our election? My democracy. It's just a load of shit. And they continue to dangle this independence cart. And there's another one, another good example, I'm starting to forget my train of thought there. Another good example. The SNP will insinuate that people are democracy deniers if they don't give the SNP another referendum on independence. But yet, this is the same SNP who are on record on more than one occasion. As I said, they blurred the lines over the years, right? So it kind of, in their eyes, it goes without saying. But Angus Robertson actually came out and said it just a year or so ago, that there wouldn't be a referendum on rejoining the EU in the event of independence. Going so far as to say they were one and the same. I take no pleasure in vindication. But it's like, I've been pointing this shit out for years. And that isn't because I'm some sort of big brain. Far from it. It's because I'm paying fucking attention. I've been saying this shit for years because I'm literally taking what they say and saying it myself. It's remarkable. And then you got John Swinney. He came out just about maybe 3-4 days ago. And he's talking about, he announced that he's going to be standing to become the new leader of the SNP. Is there going to be an election? No, it's a fuck, So the dickheads that voted in Hamza Youssef will get another chance of voting another dickhead. That's great. Kate Forbes has announced she's going to be backing John Swinney. She's not going to be standing for election. To be honest, it's probably a good thing, really. I was a bit concerned about Kate Forbes because I felt that Kate Forbes is somewhat a lot more popular than previous leaders or candidates even. I mean, even the likes of my grandmother who despises the SNP likes Kate Forbes. I'm sure there's plenty of other people out there. Don't get it twisted. I don't like Kate Forbes. I sure as fuck despise her nonsense regarding Highland depopulation. The solution is always immigration. And I'll probably just come on to that in just a second. But she's a lot fucking better than some of them. But I'm sick of this. This is what we've resulted, or we have lowered ourselves to. The best of a bad bunch, you know. Ah, well, if Kate Forbes gets in, you know, she might be a bit of a dickhead, but, you know, it could be worse. Why should it be worse? Why the fuck should it be any worse? And that's not me saying it when the next elections do roll around. Come on, pal. It's going to be any better. The likelihood is fucking Labour might get in again in Scotland. So we'll have an arse sour instead of Umsley Youssef. That'd be great. Another arsehole. You know? And it's not even really just for what you would assume if you listen to this. And you're like, ah, it's because he's brown. He's a fucking dickhead. You know? He panics and preaches the same nonsense that Hamza Youssef does. He just comes at it from a different slant. Because the Labour Party and the SNP are no different. They're really not. Let's not forget as well that the SNP's members started to climb in number when Labour started to fall in Scotland. The only difference that I can really tell between the SNP and Labour in a Scottish context is that one doesn't shut the fuck up about a referendum and the other one knows so much. You know? But given the fact we know what a referendum entails, it's EU membership or the UK, what sort of fucking decision is that? But democracy. But yeah, John Swinney, and he's talking about he wants to be the leader in an open and diverse Scotland. I'm sick of this shit. These words, these fluffy, annoying, malicious, and dare I say malevolent phrases. Open and diverse society, or an open and diverse Scotland. What the fuck does that mean? Why is it that whomever gets in does not shut up about my diversity? It's a repellent to me. I'd like to think that it's becoming a repellent to an increasing amount of people across society. Because you can't unsee it when you start to see it. More and more and more people, albeit anecdotal as far as I'm concerned, more and more people that I've conversed with over the years are starting to notice things. This shit that they call diversity, it's not something that should just be praised on the face of it, you know? Things come at a cost. And then it goes back to an old Laura Tyler phrase, I guess. We were never asked. Who the fuck asked us? You know? And then it comes back to us where like every single policy, this is another one about democracy, you know? Come on, pal. My democracy, you know? You know, every party, cross-party consensus about climate change targets, that was another one. That was kind of the catalyst, the sustainable straw that broke the sustainable camel's back, if you will. You know, where the government couldn't fulfill their climate target for 2030. Right? This was shouted about and the SNP were lambasted and harangued, despite that even the media were doing it, despite the fact that hidden within the small print, and when I say small print, I mean during the SNP's announcement of it in Parliament, they were they were still hell-bent on fulfilling their target by 2045. And then it brought forward additional policies that they're going to do to ensure that they achieved their 2045 target. They didn't just say, ah, no, we can't achieve this shit. They didn't pull out of a target. All they did was postpone it. You know, more talk of getting us out of cars, etc., etc. Same bullshit. Who asked for that? It's a cross-party consensus though, so whoever gets in, SNP, Labour, Tory, Lib Dem, etc., etc., they all sing from the same hymn sheet in that regard. That isn't democracy. That's the equivalent of a one-party state. And if anything, it actually goes a long way to show exactly why I said earlier on that Scottish politics, and this isn't just limited to Scotland, but as I said, in my context, or from where I am, in a Scottish context, it goes a long way to show just why it is so theatrical. It doesn't matter who the fuck you vote for, because they all and I mean all, are going to pretend that climate change is a fucking crisis. They're all going to talk to no end about that. Of course they are. They're all going to agree that migration is our only solution to an aging population, etc. There's certain political issues, right, that there's cross-party consensus on. And that has been the norm for the longest time. You know? So it doesn't matter who gets in. That isn't democracy. That is not democracy. You know? And another one I'll bring up as well that pisses me off. They go on to no end, like when it comes to like the hate crime bill, when they're pushed on it or whatever, they go, oh well, you know, the vast majority of MSPs in the Parliament voted for it. And what, did we vote for it? No. If anything, that just goes to show exactly what I'm talking about in terms of the vast majority of the Parliament share your worldview. That isn't democracy. I could go on all day. And a pal. Fucking hell, he's enjoying a sniff. You know, it's not democracy if every party agrees on the same thing. They might all agree on it, but it doesn't mean we do. We get no say anymore. All you do is vote in what dickhead to represent you. And they don't even represent you anymore. All you're doing is changing the colour of the flag. That's it. But yeah, an open and diverse society. What the fuck does this shit mean? I mean, it's never ending. It's never ending. I will take a wee white pill from it though. Like all these like local elections that have been happening up and down the country and that. Yeah, the Tories in some instances are getting booted out, and so are the SNP up here in Scotland. You know, but what you're seeing is a much smaller turnout in all of these instances. I take that as a white pill, to be honest. Now, as I said, I'm not really the type of guy to sit and poo-poo on anybody who wishes to vote or, you know, participate in the political system and whatnot. Feel free, more power to you, you know. But you should respect my view and my rights to think it's a waste of time. The only time I ever actually come out and say that is normally when I'm asked my opinion on it. And I'm just shut up and I don't talk about it. But I can't help but feel that the turnouts that you're seeing, these abysmal turnouts, why is that? On a side note, by the way, right? See up there? I've been getting a lot more for many a year now, but up there, they've been tree felling, and they're just totally destroying the surrounding area of this loch. It's fucking awful, to be honest. I mean, there's barely any trees in Scotland as it is, you know. I mean, I just think that lochs should be off limits, if I'm honest, because lochs especially, they harbour a lot of life, whether it be birds or loch moys full of fish and whatnot, obviously, but like just a lot of aquatic animals, a lot of insects, a lot of life, really, and they're just going about pillaging all the fucking trees, you know. But it's fine because they're growing some over there. Oh, that makes it okay then. What the fuck? It's disgusting. Absolutely butchered that hillside, and it's been expanding. I haven't been here in a few months. Yeah, democracy. I don't know. Just who gets in this like open and diverse? So like the main reason that the SNP, right, have any support is for independence. Okay. And as I said, they've bastardised what independence means, and now it's about EU membership. Okay. Now whether or not you're on the EU train or not is irrelevant. That's not independence. I'm sorry, it's fucking not. Right? First and foremost, it's not. And second of all, that isn't what the SNP's momentum it was about to begin with. It was about independence. Okay, so shut the fuck up and own what you're about nowadays. That'd be a start, but they don't even do that. Right? But the point is though, that's what they're about. Independence, right? Okay, but then they get in time and time again on this precursor, and what are they going to do? Oh, we don't want an open and diverse society, we want a hate crime bill. Oh yeah, hate crime bill. We want immigration. You know, we want rural migration pilot schemes. You know, we want to achieve climate targets. We want to enshrine LGBT education. You know, we want to lock down the fucking country from a koof. You know, who voted on that? Oh, but the Tories, what about them? What about them? When are we going to stop this shit, this whataboutery bullshit? That's what it is. You know, whenever they are compared to any other odious and insidious political entity out there, whether that be the Tories or further afield, they just go, oh, well, what about them? What about you fucking cunts? What about you? Ram your democracy up your fucking arse, quite frankly, eh? As more and more parts of Scotland become unrecognisable, as more and more parts of Scotland become impoverished, as more and more parts of Scotland, as far as councils and whatnot are concerned, start to adapt or adopt climate policies and new education curriculum and whatnot to suit your shit, and they've got the perfect get out clause not there. It's not up to us, it's up to the councils. Oh, it's not right. Half the councils, if not more, are fucking SNP anyway. This is a one-party state, and even if the SNP were to drop off the radar tomorrow, you are indeed, my friends, going to get another dickhead in their place, because they all sing from the same hymn sheet. As I said though, I'm aware of that. However, the SNP are the ones that screech the loudest about democracy, and they are the biggest fucking hypocrites going. Peace.